In this exercise, we're going to take a look at the Device Manager in Windows Server 2003. Particularly, we're going to take a look at various different types of hardware devices and just look at some of the properties that are available for being configured. So as you know from the text, there's many different ways that you can launch the Device Manager. One would be by going to Control Panel and using the Computer Management tool in Administrative Tools. And the one that we'll use here is we'll right-click on the My Computer icon and go to Manage. And this will launch the Computer Management tool. And we'll click on Device Manager. Now in the default view of Device Manager, you'll see all of your hardware devices that are configured on this machine, and they'll be grouped by the type of device. For example, you'll see that there's disk drives, hard disk controllers, DVD and CD-ROM drives. In this exercise, we're just going to take a quick tour through various types of devices. First, let's take a look at IDE controllers. You'll see here that already is configured my PCI Busmaster IDE controller, which is built into this machine. And let's specifically take a look at the primary and secondary IDE channels. So to do that, we'll click on the primary IDE channel, right-click on it, and go to Properties. This will pull up the properties sheet for the primary IDE channel. And you'll notice that there's some pretty familiar tabs here, including General, Driver, and Resources. But for this exercise, we're going to take a look at Advanced Settings. In the Advanced Settings section, you can choose a transfer mode for your various hard disk devices. Now, on modern machines, you'll probably want to choose the Direct Memory Access option if your hardware supports it. However, there's also another option, which is PIO only. PIO mode, Programmed I/O mode, was actually designed for older hard disks. So if you have some legacy hardware, you might have to choose that option for troubleshooting purposes. In this exercise, we're not going to make any changes, so I'll go ahead and click on the Cancel button to continue. Okay, next let's take a look at the actual disk drives that are connected to these hardware controllers. Here you'll notice that there's two physical hard disks that are installed in this machine. In this case, I've got two IDE hard disks, one 30 gigabyte and one 40 gigabyte. So let's take a look at the 30 gigabyte disk and look at the properties for that device driver. You'll notice that on the Policies tab, you have a few options here. For example, you can enable write caching on the disk, and this will improve performance, but as the message tells you that there is some risk that if the server goes down unexpectedly, you might run into problems with data not being saved before the power is lost. One other useful tab is the Volumes tab. Here we'll click the Populate button, and this will show us some basic information about the disk. In addition to just some physical information, for example, the capacity, which is close to 30 gigabytes here, you'll notice that my logical D partition is actually taking up all of the space on that hard disk. And if I wanted to view more information about that logical partition, I could just click on the Properties button. Again, we're going to click Cancel and move on to the next type of hardware device. In this case, let's take a look at some of our communications ports. They're located under the Ports, COM, and LPT section. I'll go ahead and choose the only communications port I have, COM1, and again go to Properties. One of the useful settings here is port settings. You'll notice that the default settings for a communications port are fairly low, set at 9600 bits per second. So if you're using a serial device and you find that performance is not what you expected, you can probably up this pretty safely to something like, for example, 115,200 bits per second and get some improved performance. I'll go ahead and click Cancel, and we'll look at one last type of device. And in this server, I've actually got a wireless network adapter installed and configured. I've also got a standard network adapter installed and configured, but I don't have a, I went ahead and disabled that item so that it's not in use on this server. So let's go ahead and click the properties of the wireless network adapter. You'll notice that there's an Advanced tab here. And there are various options that I can set for this wireless adapter. So if I want to troubleshoot things like, for example, the fragmentation threshold, these are all advanced options that generally you're not going to need to set. But you can go ahead and set these here for troubleshooting purposes or to improve performance. For example, I can choose to change from the default rate of automatically figuring out the megabits per second, or the transfer rate for the network adapter, I could change to 1 megabit, 11 megabits, 2 megabits, or 5.5 megabits. And especially with wireless adapters, this can actually improve performance by forcing it to a lower rate. For example, if I'm located pretty far away from my closest wireless access point, I can choose to go to 1 megabit per second as a transfer rate. And one other option here for power management, because this network adapter allows the Wake on LAN standard. So I can choose to whether or not I want to allow this network adapter to be able to bring this computer out of standby in case the server is in standby. Okay, that concludes our tour of Device Manager. As you can see, different types of devices have different properties. So if you're having any kinds of problems, or if you want to try to optimize performance, you can look in Device Manager and look at various types of devices and look for the tabs that are unique to each type of device to try to improve the configuration of your server.